Well, you're about to hear an incredible story. You make up your own mind. It is truly remarkable. In a moment, we will be talking about Prepare for the Landings. Michael Edlejon will be our first guest. Later next hour, his co-author, Aurora Light, will join us with an equally remarkable story. That's next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie. Let me tell you a little bit about Michael Edlejon. Trained in the Edgar Cayce method of channeling at a very young age. But even from the time of his birth, Michael was born without what is called the cosmic amnesia veils. So he actually consciously remembers his soul's intergalactic origins. While growing up in Southern California, he experienced a very life-threatening emergency. And during this event, Michael says that he was physically beamed aboard a higher dimensional light ship where he encountered spiritually evolved angelic ETs. Benevolent human-appearing beings not only rescued him, but apparently verified his early memories, as well as how mass planetary divine intervention is scheduled to occur. You're going to hear some remarkable things tonight on Coast to Coast. Here's Michael. Michael, how are you?
Very good. How are you, George?
Good to have you with us. And next hour we'll bring in Aurora, your co-author, and talk about these incredible stories. First of all, tell me a little bit more about you beyond just a bio.
Well, this is something that I've been aware from the time I was born. You know, most people who are what I call volunteers in Earth embodiment are usually born with the term cosmic amnesia veils. But for myself, I actually have conscious memory prior to coming in, being on the Merkabah Federation light ships, as referred to them, and in the higher councils. I actually remember choosing my Earth parents because of their holistic and metaphysical background. And my parents were very much followers of the famous channel Edgar Cayce, as well as being very holistic in many of the things, so I didn't have all of the kind of numbing and dumbing influences that would take away some of that awareness. So at a very early age, I began to have interactions with these very human-appearing ETs and ascended beings of light. And because of this, I started going to altered states and talking in my sleep. And my father, who was a professional stage hypnotist who had studied the life of Edgar Cayce, began to interpret that he could train me as Edgar Cayce was actually trained, in the sense that Edgar Cayce, part of the story that a lot of people don't know, is he went to a psychiatrist hypnotist because he had some personal problems, and the hypnotist trained him, allowed him to get into that state, and then he learned to induce that state in himself. So at a very early age, my father recognized some of my attunement, and by 15, I was doing these more karmic kinds of readings, and later it became more transformational. As those who have a chance to read the book, Prepare for the Landings, I go quite in depth about this whole process.
You know, when I was younger, I used to read a lot of books on Edgar Cayce, Michael, and I couldn't put him down. I mean, everything about this guy, for me, was just fascinating, and I have to assume it was the same for you.
Well, yes. I mean, I wasn't that myself involved in it. My parents were involved in studying it, but as I grew older and started studying his life, and thought it was pretty remarkable, and so I thought that was very interesting, his life readings. And as I said in the beginning, the readings that I did were very similar to Cayce's in that were termed more karmic. There was past Earth lives. It had to do with certain present Earth karmic challenges, situations. But I always knew I was supposed to be a cosmic telephone line, and that higher cosmic masters would channel through me. Now, one of the incidents that occurred at a very early age, and this was actually after my first encounter that you referred to, when I was actually experienced falling off a pier in Oceanside, California, and in which I was physically taken on board at that time. I was actually told during this experience that I would later come in contact with it being known as ASHTAR. And this is a very important experience because it kind of set the stage for later experiences of intervention that I personally encountered myself that was a prelude to more mass planetary divine intervention. And that incident was extremely important because of the nuclear challenge that this planet has faced. When I was 9 years old, sitting in front of TV watching President Kennedy's news conference on the Cuban Missile Crisis. Mm-hmm. Now, ASHTAR, which was an old friend, I remember hanging out with him in the councils. I mean, as real as people I encounter down here, in some ways more important because of the interactions. And I was watching this, and I'm 9 years old, but he pops into the room. Now, he's etheric. That is, no one else could see him, but I could see him but he seemed more real to me than some of the mundane people that I saw walking around Earth. And he's standing there, and he starts talking to me telepathically, and he says, "We're not going to allow nuclear war because it's against Federation policy."
That's interesting.
Now, that was a very important, empowering, very powerful statement. He also told me that they were going to start coming down over military bases, shutting down their high-tech equipment, their missiles, as a benevolent show of force, and also talked about how the officials would use the nuclear thing as a tactic of fear, hold it over our heads as something that, quote, we couldn't solve, even though the officials would know the truth because of the benevolent show of force. Well, of course, in recent years, such as the National Press Conference several months ago and even a few years before that, where they came down and retired military personnel talking about all of their cases of the UFOs coming down over the military bases and shutting down their missiles and so on.
Well, that's true. We're going to have one heck of a coast-to-coast ride with you tonight, Michael. A lot of people will say this could be happening. Some will say maybe not. We'll let everybody make up their own minds when they hear you and later Aurora talk about her episodes as well. Now, this encounter, when you said you fell off the pier, what happened? You fell into the water? You got...
Well, yes. On a physical level, to others, nothing unusual had happened. But for me, on a very physical, personal level, I had got myself up into a dangerous position on the railing. In fact, I found out years later that many kids in the area kind of challenged each other, kind of like a little peer group kind of thing, of challenging, see if somebody would take a risk. And I got involved in it. I was only 6 years old, but I got up on the railing, and as I often share to people, one moment perhaps I thought it was cute, and I was taking a little risk. Next moment, as my foot slipped off the side, and that moment of terror, as I started to fall into the ocean. One moment I'm starting to fall, and next moment, literally, I found myself physically on board this craft that I remember being on prior to taking Earth embodiment. Now, some people might say, well, couldn't have been just my imagination that was creating this in that moment. No, this was a dramatic shift from this moment of horrendous terror, a horrible fall I was starting to go through, and next moment I'm in this incredibly wonderful, and I often people laugh and ask me, what was it like finding myself suddenly among these very human-appearing beings that had they been dressed in Earth clothes, walking the streets of Earth, you would have thought they were the average good-looking person. But it was the incredible love, it was the incredible sense of having known them, being connected with them, beings that I remember saying goodbye to. Here I am back physically with them. Now, they were dressed in silver blue metallic suits, but the incredible sense of connection with them, of knowing them, and as I said, saying goodbye to them, and now being with them. And what's significant about this moment, it wasn't that I was lucky to have this wonderful, incredible encounter. It was the fact that I remember specifically in the council, in the Federation of Light, discussing that if I got into any kind of physical danger, as well as the rest of the volunteers, in fact, if you go to my website, channelforthemasters.com, there's a list of NASA star people characteristics that Brad Steiger actually helped to compile, and I find that people who are drawn to this reality have a lot of these characteristics because we bring an energy with us that into human embodiment that affects our DNA, RNA genetic code. So for me, these beings were beings that were what I would call part of our extended cosmic family, and this was a prelude because while on board the craft, they specifically reminded me telepathically about the fact that divine intervention was going to happen in the future. They wanted to tell me then again things that we had discussed prior to coming in, because it also not only verified the memories I had carried with me, it verified a promise of protection that the Federation of Light would instigate eventually on a mass level because based on personal experiences that I had gone through. And at my website, prepareforthelandings.com, this book that I have compiled after many, many years, knowing one day I would publish a book and prepare humanity, it's really wonderful to finally get it out and make it available so that other people can be more prepared for the experience coming up.
When you fell, Michael, then were you teleported? Were you beamed? How did they grab you?
They teleported me. They put a beam on me, as I understood it, and literally in less than a split second, I find myself on this higher level. Now, on an Earth level, and this is what I would call a time-space warp, for lack of better terms, no one on the Earth plane knew I had experienced this because when they took me up, and I was there for a period of time, time doesn't exist as we think of this on a higher dimension, but for a period of time I interacted with these beings. They took away most of my trauma. Not all of it, because I still had to face some responsibility for what I had got myself into, but they took away the most of it that was very traumatic and it can shut you down. so I could deal with it a lot more effectively.
When they brought you back, where did they bring you?
They brought me back that same exact instant as the moment they had taken me up. So for anyone on the Earth level, I just continued to fall, and I hit the ocean. But they had put me in kind of a detached state, so it wasn't so severe. And it was interesting because years later, I actually encountered a man, one of the many people through many of my events, who I had a distinct impression somebody had jumped off the pier. And this man ran up to me and said, "Oh, my God, he was the one who had jumped off the piir and helped me get out of the water." And it was very interesting for that event to occur later, which was a verification of part of that memory. And also two other people that I talked to years later, they told me they remember being on the same ship I was on. Now, I don't remember them because I was focusing on the beings around me. But they remember seeing me in what we call the medical section, for lack of better terms, two different people who were young as children also aboard the ship.
How do we know you're not a hybrid? How do you know you're not one?
A hybrid?
Yeah.
I guess I'm not.
How do we know you're not a genetically altered human ET?
Well, all I can tell you is my understanding, my memory is I actually remember, in a sense, beaming down into my mother's womb. Now, that may sound kind of strange, but I remember leaving what I call an immortal light body in storage. When we come as volunteers in Earth embodiment, we leave this higher body, this higher density body, and we're born in the normal way. Now, unlike the Greys and all that negative abduction stuff, this is based on divine principle, part of a divine plan to help those what I call laggards stuck on the wheel of karma, people who've been here lifetime after lifetime. And I know there's a lot of different genetic manipulation that certain entities like the Greys have been involved in, but they're not members of the Federation. Those who come on missions here are very respectful for the divine principles. But we have come on missions to be here, live here, be as much like everyone else, and fulfill these missions that we're on. And that's why I was trained in the Edgar Cayce method, so I could eventually do these transformational channel readings, so I could tune other volunteers into their mission as well.
Now, you are a direct voice channel. Tell me how that works for you.
Well, when now originally in the Edgar Cayce tradition, I would go into a total trance. I didn't remember anything, but the feedback I got from many people was that was very insightful. It gave them insights about some of their present physical problems. But these readings were more, as I said, karmic in nature. When they took me on board the ship in '79, this was my second encounter in 1979, about 20 years later, and this was under a very life-threatening situation. And I can tell you that at that time, one of my missions has been to expose government cover-ups, to expose a lot of the stuff that what I call the cabal has been involved in, expressing technologies, anything would emancipate us and liberate us from certain people who have had all the power. And I've experienced a lot of interference. I've been attacked when I was younger, even by what I call metaphysical demonic energies, to try to take me out because of my awareness. I knew why I was here consciously, so I was a much more of a threat. And then as I got older, I started experiencing interference from military government forces. And I've met many former black op covert agents involved in things such as psychic assassination, all kinds of those kinds of things. And I experienced a direct attack in 1979 in which I did briefly die, and I was in Agoura, California at the time. And I woke up later on the ship. I'm trying to make it brief because of the time frame here. I go a lot in depth in the book about this. And I woke up and I knew they were bringing them back to life. There were four beings in blue metallic suits standing around me, totally human appearing. And for a period of time, they put the life force back in my body. Now, at that point, they did alter, in a very positive way, my DNA, RNA, so I wouldn't be vulnerable to this term psychic assassination type attempt on my life, develop an immunity. And they also told me on board the ship, a being named Corton, who I met, who in the ASHTAR command is a communication specialist. He told me from then on, the channelings that I would then do would be for others like myself, volunteers in Earth embodiment. He told me I was going to come upon this list of characteristics that would help to physiologically identify us. Well, 2 months later, in the old East-West Journal, an old metaphysical holistic publication, Brad Steiger had just released some of this information on the Star People research. I looked at the list and I thought, oh, my God, almost everyone on the list, which really didn't surprise me. Well, sure enough, from then on, the people who contacted me, that were drawn to me, were others like myself, and I found they had a lot of these characteristics in common. And in my book, Prepare for the Landings, I describe that in a chapter, giving all my insights and some of the research that has gone up to that point to give people some insights about it.
Tell me again about the next time you were contacted after this initial episode.
Well, you're talking about the physical contact in '79.
Right.
Was quite an interesting experience because, again, on board, just like at 6 years of age and 59, one of the things that Corton, who I interact with primarily aboard the craft, and when he connected with me, I remembered interacting with him in the councils. He's a communication specialist. When I do my channeling classes, and they are actually at prepareforthelandings.com, there's a couple of DVDs that I've been distributing. One of them is called Dynamics of Cosmic Telepathy, and it's also based on a book that an earlier channel named Tuwela had published called Dynamics of Cosmic Telepathy, which teaches you how to develop a clear channeling ability. Because technically we're all channeling life forces, learning to interpret the signal. So in my channeling classes, Corton overshadows it in a sense and makes sure that people can become more attuned, because the Elohim are using consciousness technologies. When I do these transformational readings, they actually have an energy beam on me from the Merkabah light ship, and they're downloading these termed higher light encodements placed on the tape, the audio tape. So when you play the tape back, the interesting thing is it helps to activate the DNA RNA and cause some pretty powerful transformations in people's lives. The feedback that I get from many of my clients and different people is pretty, what they say is phenomenal. After all these years, I'm still pretty blown away by some of the things that people experience based on these experiences.
Now, all right, after this initial contact, first was 59, second was 1970.
79. Those two physical encounters are the only ones I've had.
Okay.
But I've met a few incognito beings on Earth as I have traveled around the last 20, 25 years, 30 years. I've met a few of them, and one of those incidents has to do with the evacuation, what I was actually told. If you read the book, George,
yes.
It has an incident that happened in 1981 at Squaw Peak Park in Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay, that's right. Now, at what point during this span did you talk to your friends, your family, and say, hey, these things are happening to me?
Well, I have to say this. I had, over a period of time, a little bit of falling out. You know, we, as volunteers, being born into Earth biological families, and I think a lot of people can relate to this out there, you know, there are sometimes dysfunctional Earth patterns that come up, and we deal with the best we can, but sometimes that causes a little falling out, and, you know, a little petty stuff happens, and I actually kind of had a little falling out because of some stuff, that misunderstanding communications, and I actually didn't see my Earth mother until just recently. Now, I just might as well mention this, that my father, named Paul Block, died in a gyrocopter crash a few months ago flying out of Cave Junction Airport here in Oregon.
Oh, my.
And I found this out when my brother, I hadn't talked for many years, called me up suddenly out of the blue. That's why I'm up here in Southern Oregon on a book signing tour. I'm actually set up a couple events there I'm going to be doing, which I can actually mention. If anybody's in Southern Oregon that would like to attend, I can let you know about it. But I hadn't seen my mother for 30 years, and I had been very quiet as a child. I didn't, other than the fact that my parents were a little more open, allowing some Earth metaphysical things. Of course, I was coming in with galactic metaphysics, so there was a little bit of communication barrier there. Even though most people would say they were pretty evolved compared to most Earth parents, I had all this other memory, and I couldn't help but compare other beings that I had interacted with them. I tried to, you know, be a good child, but I was constantly getting in trouble at school when I would challenge the teachers, be sent to principal's office, because to me, the teacher was teaching us half and partial truth. So I had an unusual upbringing, and as I said, on some personal levels, I was kind of had my own mind up about what I was going to be doing. So it's not till recently that I had a chance to kind of share. My mother actually read my book for the first time, and as I said, they didn't know at 6 years of age I actually had this experience. And
you kept with them. You kept that to you. You kept that to yourself. We'll talk more when we come back. Prepare for the landings. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Michael Elijan, our special guest. Prepare for the landings, his work. We're going to get into some of the incredible things that he learned about chemtrails, Planet X, Armageddon, perhaps. But I'm trying to set the stage so you know a little bit more about Michael and what he went through. Michael, you say you are a star person. Tell me more about that.
Well, that term, star person, which was related to Brad Steiger's research with some NASA engineers and scientists, correlated and verified my own awareness, because as I mentioned earlier, when I taken aboard the ship in '79 and being told by this being Corton, who is a major member of the ASHTAR Command, the Federation of Light, and telling me that I was going to come upon this list of characteristics, and then 2 months later, after this encounter, finding this list in the old East-West Journal and noting that I had almost everyone on the list, because the theory, which to me is more than the theory, is that when I took Earth embodiment, because I retained conscious memory, physiologically, that higher energy, the higher consciousness that I was able to retain on the physical level affected my DNA, RNA genetic code, and I took on these patterns. And depending on how much other star people, other volunteers, light workers, indigos, walk-ins, different terms of this, have been able to retain when they come into Earth embodiment, is how many of those characteristics the person ends up having. And so the list is something that I find a lot of people find very fascinating when they look at it and go, oh, my God, I do have that, and I have that, and people realize the significance that is a physical, to me, evidence of their soul being from a higher world of the Federation of Light.
Would we be in shock over the amount of people that might be star people and who they might be?
I don't think so. My perception through the research I've been involved in and meeting lots of people through the years, through workshops and seminars and stuff, and people are drawn to this, I would say about 25% of the world's population minimum are souls directly off the ships, and then there's a large group of humanity that might have come here originally. I think everybody on Earth, and technically millions and billions of years ago, were from somewhere else. It's just that there are some of us more immediately, more directly from off the ships, and we retain a little more of that energy pattern. And I think right now we're going through a major energy shift. In fact, tonight, one of the significant things, and I got some feedbacks from others, that being known as Lord Metatron is anchoring what some call the platinum ray during this full moon tonight. It's actually been coming in for a while, but it's one of the many new frequencies, new cosmic frequencies hitting the planet that's never been here before, which is going to cause a major shift in the timeline, like a new timeline being created, and everybody's starting to awaken. All over the planet right now, there's a huge shift, which is also exposing the cabal, waking everybody up to their mission and purpose.
Yeah, I think so too, Michael. I can feel that. It's been happening over the last couple of years, but it's really happening now.
Mm-hmm.
And, here it rolls. You had said that, they're human looking. Do they look like us, or do we look like them?
Well, we, quote, the human race was, and through my communications and contact, it's been very clearly shown, and I have memory going back ages of time, that the human race, Earth human, was genetically seeded originally by the Elohim, human-appearing higher beings who created human bodies so that these less advanced souls could progress and evolve at their own rate. Later on, unfortunately, beings like the Draconians and Anunnaki and other came in and infiltrated the Elohim colonies, shut down 10 of our original 12 strands, and really messed things up. And now, finally, after all these ages, the whole planet's about to graduate. It's going through an ascension process so that all of the negative or imbalanced elements are going to be basically transmuted, and I think the next 2 years we're going to see the cabal being fully exposed. This is if things keep going the way things are energetically, my sources have told me that there's been numerous, after 9/11 being a wake-up call, there's been numerous false flag events that actually have been neutralized by the Federation of Light that weren't allowed to play out, or we would be in many times worse mess than we are right now.
Michael, the situation, and we're going to get into some of these events that are going on. I've always heard that they can't get involved. They can't, put their hands on helping us or saving us. It sounds like that might not be the case.
Well, yes and no. There has always been laws of non-interference in the Federation of Light, but there are some exceptions. And those exceptions are actually, there's about 4 of those. There was originally 3. One of those is if a planet's a threat to itself, that is, through nuclear war, through destruction, it would affect the other planets because of blowing up, by being affected in a negative way. A second one is if planet's a threat to other worlds. And there's a lot of evidence now because of people like Gary McKinnon, who confirmed what ASHTAR and other beings have told me years ago, that the government back-engineered black op technologies. There's a little anti-gravity fleet flying around up there. If you look through night vision goggles, you can actually see some so-called battles where the cabal ships, the anti-gravity ships, are actually trying to fire on the Federation light ships that are in guardian action around the planet, trying to make this out to be an invasion when it's really intervention. And if a planet is also if a planet's holding up the evolution of other planets at the ends of all these cycles, then they are mandated to intervene and help the planet go through this transition, hence the need for evacuation and divine intervention.
The ability of human beings at this point to glance into the future, to change their own destiny, seems to be growing as well. Are they sharing that with us? Are we getting that from them?
Well, yes. My perception is that, and this is kind of a theory, but it's more than a theory, that there is a group of those of us, and George, you could be part of this group too, that our oversoul future self has come back, in a sense, from the future. This is a crude way I explain it, into impacting the past-present timeline, that we're actually creating a new timeline overlapping the old timeline. So a lot of the plans of the cabal, like martial law and all these other things, are not occurring because there's so many of us whose consciousness from the future has merged back and are altering the future outcome. That's why instead of being a third of humanity surviving, at least 2/3 to 3/4 in this new vibration, new timeline are going to survive and go into the golden age. But there's a lot of cleansing, a lot of cleanup that's going to happen over the next couple of years as we approach 2012. And because of the return of Nibiru, Wormwood, the Federation is poised right now. If need to evacuate, for that reason they will. But I also see this, as I describe in the book, Prepare for the Landings, as a R&R situation for many of us that came here. I remember being in the councils, this being discussed, that we would promise that would be lifted up in a series of ways rather than just one to make sure every soul is accounted for. This is what I describe in depth at Prepare for the Landings.
All right, how many different kinds of extraterrestrials are out there, Michael? We've heard about the Greys, the Reptilians, the Nordiques. What's out there?
Well, there's quite a few, but one of the largest groups that has been highly suppressed, and I find this in the UFO community, there's been an agenda for years when I've gone to a lot of these conferences. I believe very strongly that people like George Adamski, George Van Tassel, Hardmenger, these original pioneers, they were the ones who had authentic contacts with human-appearing ETs, and then the UFO community formed and had a psychops of debunking, ridiculing, suppressing these more empowering, uplifting experiences while they stuffed the Greys down our throats, talked about strange, mysterious lights in the sky, and always say everything is fraud or hoax. I think the Belly-Myers contact case really brought it into perspective. Here was a case, well-documented, crystal metal samples, people like Marcel Vogel analyzed, and yet MUFON and a lot of groups still wanted to debunk it. I think if it had been an abduction case rather than human-appearing ETs, they would have been yelling from the rooftops to get the information out. I think there was a massive agenda and bias against anything empowering and uplifting that gives us hope, that helps empower us, prepares us for the time that's coming ahead. And this has been a lot of things that I've observed through the years. It's pretty clear there was an agenda.
Well, maybe so. I know it drives Michael Horn crazy when organized groups, ufologists, attack the Billy Meyer case.
Oh, definitely. And it's based on, and if you go back and study the life of George Adamski, he had some of the very same things that Billy Myers had, except he wasn't able to connect with people who didn't have as much of a bias because of people like Marcel Vogel and other researchers like Wendell Stevens, who recently passed away, that was very supportive to me. In fact, Wendell used to bring other experiencers to get readings from me, channelings, and through those experiences, I was able, or the beings coming through me, verify a lot of things that he was able to document in his research. So he was very supportive to Aurora Light and I, my co-author of our book, and checked it out. And so he felt that I was very right on, and so I had some support from people like him. But most of the people in the UFO community were very antagonistic because we were talking about human-appearing ETs and exposing the cover-up on that.
You had these two encounters in 59 and 79. Have you had any since?
Not any physical things, except that a contact that I share in the book of an ET walking up to me at Squaw Peak Park in 1981, incognito. Briefly, this being, I remember being in the councils where I was told one day while I was on Earth, having grown up, and that a being would walk up to me on the streets of Earth and verify in physical presence. As I share in the book, Prepare for the Landings, that this being walked up to me while I was involved in a little spontaneous lecture, and he starts telepathically communicating to me, verifying about certain things, and it was very interesting because it was verifying what I had been told in both aboard the ships, the information, and other channelings. And he told me, Michael, this was a physical confirmation for everything we've ever channeled through to you, and he told me about meeting other channels, and later I met with Tawella, who is a very clear channel, who published a book called Project World Evacuation, which I referred to in my book, because it's still very relevant material, but I took it a step further because of other insights that I felt I needed to update the information with. But it was just more substantiation and verification.
Michael, a lot of people out there believe in the UFO community that government will eventually disclose. I have gone on record saying I don't think they will. If we get this information, it'll come from solid whistleblowers. It'll get leaked out that way, but it's not going to be an official government announcement. What do you think?
I'm not holding my breath because the way I see bureaucracies and red tape, and I think the cabal has an invested interest to keep the status quo. I think there's a lot of researchers who sincerely do believe this, but I believe we have to have divine intervention, open contact massively to force the officials to have to disclose. Now, on the other hand, we have to be discerning and use our cognitive deductive reasoning to know that they want to create a false flag and try to make it out to be an invasion when these beings do come in. So we need to be discerning, but also know that if we don't have outside help, we can't solve Earth problems or Earth conditions. Inherently imbalanced, it'll be history keep repeating itself. And I think we're getting close right now, the masters tell me, to a certain percentage of Earth humanity, that when that percentage is reached within, I think, in the next 2 years, they will then be mandated to openly appear. My book, Prepare for the Landings, does really help. I kind of refer to it as the kind of the boarding pass because it gives people conscious understanding. Most people's feedback from the book is it verifies what they feel but gives a lot more detail. Things they've been feeling for many, many years. Fellow star people, volunteers, light workers.
Well, you call it Prepare for the Landings. So to me, that sounds like here they come. What does it mean?
Well, definitely. This is a prelude. This book is really meant to prepare humanity on a mass level.
As long as it doesn't say to serve man. Remember that?
Well, I remember that Twilight Zone episode, right? It was a recipe book. I understand.
Classic.
Right, but this book is a very serious presentation, a prelude to prepare humanity in detail of what they've been planning for a long time. In contacting other contacting channels, they get very much the same information. Maybe be little variances of opinion exactly how, but people like Twella and others that I've encountered through the years got very much the same information, that instead of one emergency type, one deal, it would be a series of waves to help prepare humanity over a period of time. Others experience it, come back, and others would then observe it and then be prepared physiologically as well.
What timetable are we talking about, Michael?
Well, that's the $64 million question, exactly when. And as I share in the book, there's kind of like when it says biblically that no one knows the exact our time of the day. I think it's kind of cosmically top secret because if one announces ahead of time that they're going to come down in an open way, I think the cabal at this point would try to interfere with it, try to turn it into an invasion scenario. I think they're waiting till enough energy shift occurs, enough of the population is awake that they can make a mass appearance when there's enough of a percentage of humanity to be able to ground the light and bring in the energies that will help to make it a smooth transition. And that's one of the reasons they've been waiting all these years to reach this point, which is just about upon us in the next 2 years. I believe, I don't know, but it looks like we're going in that direction.
This government secrecy, are they afraid? Is that one of the reasons they're not telling us? Is it so horrendous?
I think the power elite are afraid of losing their power. Not that we can't handle the truth. They always say, well, we can't handle it. No, they can't handle their loss of power because once they make their appearance, there's no turning back. Where at that point, all of the truth is out in the bag. Everything is out in the open, and all levels of society will be forced to change to a more constructive, benevolent, a society that uplifts and respects sacred principles, respects Mother Earth, and respects all of the things. And the higher forces have numerous solutions to every problem we've ever faced. So they're not coming in to do it for us. They're coming in to help us help ourselves. I have great faith in humanity, despite how the draconians use mind control and genetic manipulation to try to program us to be warlike. Once you remove those forces, get them out of the way, and humanity has a chance to decide with clear options, and the higher forces make those options clear, I believe that most of humanity, despite a few ones like Rothschild and some of these others, most of humanity will definitely head toward a solution that's definitely more user-friendly than what we've been struggling with up to now.
Amazing. Well, let's get into, if we can, next hour with Aurora as well, some of these incredible things you have found out, both through channeling and otherwise. Take a quick minute, if you would. Tell me about Aurora Light, and we'll do the intros when she comes back at the top of the hour, Michael. But tell us about your co-author.
Well, she's been involved. She had her encounters in Detroit, Michigan, while I had mine in California, and she was kind of brought up in her experiences as a young child, and when she got older, and then considerably older, and when I connected with her in 1981, and she shared her experiences, I was able to give her a little insight because of, like, that experience I had at 6 years of age. She had some pretty phenomenal experiences, and also developed as a channel and an intuitive and what we'd call a muse, that she helps to help people, get their mission together, their life in order and rejuvenation, so that when I do my transformational channel readings to help people understand their mission, she then helps people get into a more healthier state, so while they're still here on Earth, they can fulfill their mission in a higher quality kind of way. But her experience has verified that there were definitely extraterrestrial beings coming here to help us, to intervene ultimately, and her experiences kind of speak for themselves. It verifies also some things that I've been aware of for many, many years that I received in channeling, and she had her verification, and there was a lot of interesting things that she went through to give her confirmation of this reality.
Okay, well, I look forward to getting into some of these specifics of ETs, Planet X, chemtrails, and other things that you found out about. Prepare for the Landings. His websites, Michael's websites, are all linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Those of you who don't have a computer and you're interested in this work, and it's a fantastic read, there is a toll-free number of 800-422-0808. I'll give that to you a little bit later on tonight as well. We'll be back in a moment with Michael and Aurora Light as we talk about Prepare for the Landings. Two special guests for you now. Michael Elijan joins us, continues with Prepare for the Landings, then his co-author Aurora Light comes in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, welcome back. Let me tell you about Aurora Light. Has first-hand knowledge of human-appearing ETs since her early years. Her experiences consist of life-saving interventions, telepathic communications. She's been aboard craft as well. They have provided guidance and have monitored her throughout her life. She joins us now. She's a co-author with Michael, Prepare for Landings. Aurora, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
My
it's a pleasure to be with you this evening.
Michael was telling me you were raised in Detroit. That's my hometown, too. I left when I was 28 years old, went to Minneapolis, St. Louis. Now I'm here in L.A., but loved it. My parents are still there.
Well, I left at the same age. And I, grew up in your neck of the woods. I grew up in Royal Oak.
Sure. Oh, well.
And that's where I had my first experience, in Royal Oak, at 13 Mile and Woodward, if you know the area, Memorial Park.
What happened?
Well, it started out to be a very strange day. It was early May, and the heat was unbearable. It was 90 degrees, and it never was that in the first week of May. And so it was unusual, and my father threw open the doors and the windows, and I found out years later that they can affect the weather if they want to, these advanced ETs. And my mother was out that evening, and my infant sister was asleep in the room next to mine, and I heard these heavy footsteps walking through the front door, and my father was asleep, in his bathroom, shaving, and I was supposed to be sleeping, but instead I was kind of laying there awake thinking about things. I was watching my brand new digital clock change numbers. I thought it was...
You were fascinated by that.
I was. It was just great, So I was counting the seconds and seeing if I could time them and all that. So I hear these heavy footsteps walking through the front door, and I'm thinking, oh, somebody's walking in here, and we're not expecting any guests. My mother was out for the evening playing bridge with her girlfriends, and I couldn't understand, who this could be walking in at 9:15 in the evening. My first thought was that it was a burglar, and there had been, a break-in here or there, rarely in the area,
Sure, yeah.
but, I thought, well, maybe it's a burglar because they didn't announce themselves or anything. And when he was coming, to make the story brief, when he was coming down the hallway into my room, I thought, well, gee, I wonder if I'm dreaming.
That's scary.
Could this possibly be a dream? So I thought I need scientific proof that this is really happening. So what can I do? I'm 8 years old. I'm coming up with something here. So I bit off all my fingernails on my left hand so that I would have the tips in my mouth after it was over with. Then I'd know I'd really done it. It hadn't been a dream. So, because I was really petrified, wondering who this was.
Oh, yeah. I mean, who wouldn't be?
And the hallway was like dimly lit with this light, and I could see him standing in my doorway, and he looked just like Robert Young in Father Knows Best.
Well, that's not a bad image. He's always comfortable.
Yeah, and he was my favorite guy on TV. I just thought he was so perfect in their whole family, and I was wondering why mine wasn't like that. And I was looking at this guy, and he had on the overcoat, he had on the hat, the briefcase, and all this, and it's 90 degrees out, right? And the cashmere overcoat, all that.
Weird.
And I'm thinking to myself, why is this guy dressed like this at nighttime? And
in my room?
In this heat. Why is he standing here in my doorway? And I thought, well, I'm going to have to pretend like I'm asleep. Because I had, watched a lot of Perry Mason, and I knew that if you could identify the criminal, your odds of getting killed were high.
And are you waiting for your parents or somebody to come to your rescue?
No, because I'm figuring that if I yell out or something, my father's shaving in the bathroom, doors closed, water's running in the sink, he's got an electric shaver going, and if I made a big commotion, I thought, well, maybe something horrible would happen, and if I just stayed quiet, I thought, well, maybe he'll just not harm me. Maybe he's looking for some gold or jewelry or something. I couldn't quite figure out what was going on, but I just thought it was better to be quiet unless he tried to harm me or my infant sister.
Yeah, you're ready to scream if that happens.
I'm ready to scream if anything's happening, if anything bad happens. So, but I thought at that point I was really curious about him myself because he was so oddly dressed. And I thought, oh, this is odd. So I just kept my eyes closed as he walked into my room. He stood next to my bed for a moment or two. Then he went out my bedroom window and hopped out. I was on the first level. And I went to the window about, I would say a few seconds afterwards. I wanted to wait to give him a chance to get off our property. And then I went to the window, and I looked, and I saw the two spaceships in the park across the street.
In Memorial Park, Royal Oak.
Yeah,
I know that
Park.
well. Okay.
And it's on Star Road, oddly enough. And years later,
right.
when I went back to show some people where it had happened, there was a drive-in restaurant on the corner called The Orbit with a UFO going around in the circle above it.
Do you remember the year this might have been?
Yes, this was actually when I was 8 years old, in 1956.
56, okay.
And I had just said to my dad a few months before it happened, there was all these articles in the newspaper about UFO sightings in Michigan.
Michigan had a lot, of course, in the 60s. Hynek went crazy out there.
Yeah. And I thought to myself, wow, is this real? Are we being contacted by other, races from other planets? That's really exciting, Dad. What do you think of that? And my father had this genius IQ, he really respected him a lot. And he said, yeah, I think it's possible. He says, but I don't think there may be little green men. I don't know. He says, but I think that we're being visited probably. So I thought, well, that's fascinating. And then when I saw these two spaceships in the park across the street, I thought, oh, well, I'm seeing them. Other people have seen them. Now it's my turn. And I was all excited. I was really, really excited.
But not scared.
No, I was fascinated, actually. And I don't know how I knew at 8 years old about telepathic communication. But I did. And I said to them, when I saw the ships, I'm wondering who you are. Would you come on over and play? I'm not afraid, I said. I'd like to meet you. And I jokingly said, come play in my sandbox.
It's pretty gutsy for an 8-year-old.
I didn't know fear back then at all. And I still have a hard time with it. So anyway, and then I was standing there staring at the ships, and one looked like a powder blue. and it was like dish-shaped. And it was beautiful, really luminescent.
How big was it?
I would estimate about 75 feet across.
Okay.
Pretty big. Maybe 100 feet.
Yeah.
It was hovering just above the trees there in Memorial Park. And the other one that was next to it was like a round ship, perfectly round. Now, I don't know if it was on its side or what. And it was a beautiful color rose. And I was just mesmerized by them. They looked so etheric and gorgeous. And then I thought, I wonder if everybody else is seeing them. So I stuck my head out the window, and I was looking down the backyards of everybody, up and down the backyards, and I didn't see anyone out. And I thought, just when the most important thing in my life is happening, no one's around, And then I thought, I didn't dare step away from the window because I thought they might be gone by the time I get back.
Do you think that these beings are the same ones that Michael has encountered?
Well, I do know that they are, because things that happened afterwards in my life, it did let me know that they were higher spiritual beings. And so I'm looking at them and I'm wondering, okay, who are you? And I'm waiting for a telepathic transmission to hit me. And I couldn't really get anything. So I jokingly said to them, well, either I'm a bad sender or you're bad senders, or I'm not getting a thing. I'm a bad receiver. I said, I'm not getting a thing. And with that, one ship went up, and it made this noise like, and then the other one went up and went, real fast like that, and made that high-pitched noise, and then they both dematerialized. And I was like, real fast. They were just there 1 second and gone the next.
You were not beamed aboard at that point?
No. That was my first sighting, and I knew they were real. And I ran to tell my father. I knocked on the bathroom door. I said, Dad, I have scientific proof this really happened. Look at my nails in my mouth. And he started laughing. And I said, I'm going to the phone now. I'm going to call the news, the news station.
He said that, or you said that?
I said that. I said, I'm going to go call the news. Everybody needs to know about the UFOs I saw. And he said, don't do that. And I said, why not? He said, because they'll lock you up and there will be nothing I'll be able to do about it.
In those days, he was right. Aurora, they did not take these reports seriously by any of these. Let me bring Michael in for just a second. Michael, at any point with what was happening to you, did you and Aurora ever meet in a craft or anything like that?
No, it wasn't until 81 later. As I said, she had her experience in Detroit. I had mine in California, kind of separately, but then we joined later to share because we had both a lot in common because of our consciousness as we grew older. And for me, of course, I had always known this from the time I was born, but her experiences verified so that later when we did connect, it was, we were able to give more of an overall picture from her perspective and mine together, and that's what's true with many contactees and channels. When we meet years later from having personally so many people who had as a child, and then we all meet through our events and stuff, we can all kind of correlate and say, well, this gives verification, and we can relate to your experience and so on.
You got a number of messages, which we're going to talk about, Michael. Aurora, did you get similar messages as well about Armageddon and, Planet X and issues like that?
Well, I had a series of events, encounters, that being the first one that opened my eyes that they were real. And then the next one at 16, I was teleported through a time-space warp. I was driving my boyfriend's convertible, and at 5 o'clock rush hour, heading south on Southfield Road, and I didn't realize that this light at the corner of 11 Mile in Southfield was ill-timed. And it was the number 2 source for car accidents and deaths in the state of Michigan.
Oh, my.
And I was very good at timing lights, and when I looked up and saw that the light had turned red, I knew I couldn't stop in time. I was so busy looking for the new entrance to the John Lodge Expressway. I was trying to get downtown and do what we used to call the Lodge Dodge.
See, I used to work at WJBK Television at 9 Mile in Southfield. Remember that?
Yes,
Channel
I
2.
do.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so I'm trying to find it, and I couldn't find it. And I look up and I see the light's red, and I'm going 50 miles an hour, and I'm going, okay, that's it. I'm in big trouble. And I thought, I looked at, and I saw all these cars coming into the intersection, and I locked in on this one lady who was leading the pack coming into the intersection with 3 children in the car. And I was about to broadside her. And I said, dear God, please don't let me hurt or kill anyone. And I threw myself on the floor of the car because the impact was about to happen. And with that, there was no noise, there was no sound.
What?
There was no movement.
What happened?
And I thought I died. And I thought it'd been that painless of a transition that I didn't even feel it.
You didn't feel motion of the car?
No, I felt nothing. There was no noise. There was no movement.
At what point did you stick your head up and look around?
Well, I lay there for a moment or two waiting for something to happen. I was trying to gather my wits. And I said, okay, I've got to sit up and see where I've wound up. And I was face down on the passenger side of the car, on the floor of the car, waiting for the crash to start. I had left my left arm on the steering wheel and my left foot on the brake, and nothing was happening. So I sat up. There I was, parked lanes over all the traffic and parked perfectly next to the gas station pump on the opposite corner.
And you have no idea how you got there?
On the opposite corner of where I had been.
Were people looking at you like they had witnessed this? Or
No, nobody was moving yet. They were all still frozen in suspended animation, everyone. I could not see any movement. There was not a bird aflutter. There was not a leaf twittering. There was nothing moving.
It was like an old Twilight Zone film. It was just
It really was. It was like the one step beyond, and the Twilight Zone for sure. And I started laughing, and that's what I said to myself. I said, oh, this is like the Twilight Zone. Oh, my God. And I was just like laughing and looking around and trying to figure out how I got there and what had happened. And there was this man who was frozen in stride walking back to his gas station. He was an old jet who was pumping gas there. And his back was to me, and he was frozen in mid-stride. And I was just staring at him and looking at the people's faces and everything, going, oh, my God, I could see them in their cars and stuff. I thought, this is so wild.
Well, you somehow stopped time, or they did.
They did.
Yeah.
They did. It was beyond anything I was capable of doing, that's for sure. And so I said to them telepathically, I said, what happened? Like that, I said to them telepathically, and they said back to me, because certain times in my life I've had this incredible telepathic transmissions that have always been astounding.
Have they been watching you over these years or bailing you out of problems like that?
Well, since then, many times, actually. So that was a good problem. That was a time when they really came in handy. So I said, what happened? And they said, and this woman's voice, clear as a bell in my head, said, chalk it up to divine intervention.
Huh. How true,
And I said, really? Why did you save my life when every day so many incredible people die? And they said, because you have a mission. And I said, what is it? Pray tell. And they said, you'll see, it all will be revealed. And I said, well, thank you. And that was the end of the transmission. And
did you believe it at that time?
Of course. It was all this going on at the same time. It was remarkable. And so I was just flabbergasted by it all. And I said, okay, I want things to go back to normal. Everyone was still frozen while this transmission's going on. And I look at the man there frozen with his back to me, and I say to him, I yell out, hey, mister, fill her up. And he turns around, starts walking towards me. All the traffic starts back up again.
The noise, everything, yeah.
No one looks at me strangely at all. No one even knows like I'm there, and he walks up to my window of my car. And I said to him, mister, did you hear me pull in? And he goes, what? And I said, well, did you happen to hear me pull in? Did you hear this car pull in? He said, huh? Like that.
He had no idea what you were talking about.
No, and I said, well, just fill it up when God parks you next to the pump. Just fill it up.
Amazing. Well, Aurora, stay with us. We're going to continue with your story, and you, Michael, as well, as we talk about your joint work, prepare for the landings. And wait till you hear what we're going to talk about when the landings occur, because something is about to happen. But what are they trying to warn us? What are they trying to let us know? Their websites are linked up at coasttocoastam.com. And if you need to email me, that's George at coast2, T-O, coasttocoastam.com. We'll be back in a moment right here on Coast to Coast AM. Well, we'll open up the phone lines next hour as we talk about prepare for the landings right here on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back. We're with Aurora Light and Michael Elizon. Is that French, Michael?
Elizon, cosmic French.
Ah, I was close. Tell me what you learned about the book of Revelation.
Well, from a very young age, I was guided to study it. Now, to me, it always has been an extraterrestrial UFO case book. My sources, ASHTAR and Higher Being, specifically told me that many of these cases in biblical times, ancient times, are really descriptions of their ships, their light ships, and they were referred to as angels in the Bible and later and earlier as gods and goddesses. And humanity often would use terminology, whether we call it the Star of Bethlehem or the Burning Bush. And in fact, when I was 9 years of age, I'm sitting in the back porch of my home, and this is the God-honest truth. The being we know is Jesus, Yeshua. I mean, suddenly he's there standing, and physically, I mean, I could have reached out to touch him. Tangible body, he's standing there looking down at me, and it was awesome. He's there, and he disappears, and I call it the archetype thought form, because he appeared as the long hair, robes, and white sand, and then all of a sudden, he reappears, same being. And George, this is what he appeared in, a silver, gold, metallic jumpsuit. I mean, I'm telling you the truth. This is how he appeared. He's looking at me, and he says, "I'm your Commander-in-Chief, Lord Sananda." Now, it was like, cool. I mean, I related to him. I remember being with him aboard the great motherships. I also have a lot of memory, George, from my past lives at that time, 2,000 years ago, being there during those events. And what's really fascinating, as one of the guests, I believe you had on your show, Andrew Bishargo, who as a child was a time traveler in Project Pegasus, connected with Project Montauk. He describes being sent through time and how they actually developed the ability to videotape through chronovision. Well, I remember there being being near the tomb, and there was a flash of light in the tomb. This is after when he was in the tomb, and he sits up, and I remember him tossing aside the shroud of Turan. Now, Andrew says that his father, he didn't see it, but his father did in that program of actually videotaping certain times of human history. One of those was the crucifixion and resurrection. And my memory of that life, there was this flash in the tomb, and Jesus stepping out of the tomb with two light beings, and Andrew's telling me they videotaped the exact thing that I remember in my memory of that lifetime.
Jeez. That's a great story.
Well, it's real, too, to me.
That's awesome. And, this divine intervention that Michael and I have had throughout our life. Michael, I think when you said to George you haven't had contact since then, we've had many, many dozens upon dozens of paranormal type experiences together, Michael. I can remember when we were living in Malibu and having our Wednesday night meetings, this gorgeous white owl sitting over our doorway. I mean, who has that happen?
Yeah.
While the people are arriving. I mean, we had so many paranormal experiences on a regular basis when we were on the M4 in France, traveling throughout Europe, lecturing, and Great Britain, and traveling in France and Italy. We had two ships come down off the M4 one evening when we were parked in one of those beautiful parks that they have there. So
that was very interesting from what we tuned into, that as with American intelligence, British intelligence, from what I understand, actually tried to get rid of us, and attempted several times to blow up our van. And
what?
all kinds of stuff was happening that later I got attunement about this. Oh, yeah, because we were exposing human-appearing ETs, just like they traded off being 79 because of exposing government cover-ups. But when you have a good cosmic backup team, you don't really sweat it too much other than it actually is a verification that you must be doing something right, or you wouldn't have that kind of interference.
Now, when Michael said that there was this divine intervention about to take place, you know, I got a confirmation on that before I ever met him. When I was about 24 years old, I was teaching metaphysics in Detroit, just out of my home for a small group of people that I invited in to, you know, so we could practice meditation, some psychic development, and some, you know, pranayama, breath of fire, things like that. And we were studying theosophy and other things at that time. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the next thing I know, I'm out on a camping trip with one of my students who begged me to go with her. And the next thing, I'm seeing these ships in the sky lined up in perfect rows, like the assembly line at GM used to be, George.
Yep.
And, I mean, George, these ships went from horizon to horizon in perfect rows. And they were about the size of a dime. And it was just incredible. And I woke up my friend who was with me. I said, come on out here and tell me what you see. And she saw them too.
Are you both convinced now that something is about ready to happen on this planet?
Well, that's my point of that little story I wanted to just say is that, you know, I asked Michael when I met him, I said, well, you know, I told him that story about Zeno, those ships. And I said, what do you make of that? And go ahead, Michael. Go ahead and share with him what you told me.
Well, I had known for years that the Federation of Light is in guardian action around the planet. I told her, I said, well, they're in guardian action. You were allowed to see all these, just in that one little area of sky, the thousands that are part of the millions and millions of ships of
They
the light.
actually surround the whole planet, George.
All right.
And they're in a higher dimensional frequency, so we can't usually see them.
Are they watching us, or are they ready to protect us?
They are here to protect us, but they don't. They respect our free will, but they want to take away the planetary quarantine that this planet's been under for ages because of the warlike nature of many of the power elite, the Illuminati, the Cabal. They want to give humanity some options that our leaders won't give us.
Well, the Cabal's still here.
Oh, yes, and they're gearing up. From my understanding, they have told me, as the energies intensify, the new incoming cosmic frequencies I referred to earlier, like a two-edged sword. For the light workers, for those of us who value the sacred principles of life, things are going to get better and better and better. But for the Cabal, this is their Waterloo coming up. If they don't turn to the light, if they don't respect our sovereignty and respect and embrace the sacred principles, they will cease to exist.
Which they won't. I don't think they'll respect
Well, they're not, and that's why they're going to actually be kicked to the cosmic curb very soon. I know some people say, how could that be possible? Well, with higher Elohim technology, and because this plan's reaching the end of a great cycle, a time of graduation, these next 2 years are going to really separate the wheat from the chaff, is going to really clarify. If those of you who are very sensitive out there, in the last 2 weeks especially, I myself felt an incredible energy shift that's starting to intensify right now. If things keep accelerating as it appears to be, a lot of things are going to be exposed, brought out in the light of day. Everything's going to become very clear to everybody. They can no longer fool us like they used to, because I think cognitive deductive reasoning and discernment is starting to come back to us, and we can see clearly. If we tune in and use our God-given ability to discern, we can see what's going on. And if we embrace the sacred things, these beings will support us and help us. But they're not going to support us. Okay.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Michael. You know, but these chemtrails, I just wanted to make a point, George. These chemtrails and these sprays that are being put on all our food, water, you know, the birds dying, the insects, the bees, the fish. I mean, this is
cows,
a high alert
They
time.
had 200 cows in Wisconsin die over the weekend. I mean, strange.
I mean, people got to start waking up hearing these things. I have been talking about, and Michael, I've been talking about these chemtrails now for 16 years.
Way before anybody else was.
When are people going to wake up out of their apathy and realize there's something going on.
Well, this audience knows that. Outside of this, they're not aware of this. You talk to them about things like this, and they think you're nuts.
Well, you can be very well-educated fools these days.
There has been speculation, both of you, that one day we will wake up in the morning and there will be massive ET craft over major cities on this planet. Is that going to happen, Michael?
Yes, it will. Ultimately, it will. And as I said earlier, they are kind of climatizing us, vibrationally getting us attuned as they raise the frequency. It's like turning up a knob. I can clearly feel this increase. And more and more people are waking up, people that you never thought would be even interested into it, because either we wake up and realize what's going on, or we're not going to survive the shift coming up. I think it's a wake-up call for everybody, and that's one of the things that for years and through my transformational readings also, it's provided people with a way to more personally plug in and become attuned to on a personal level, and also the book, of course, Prepare for the Landing, helps people get a collective view.
Go ahead, Aurora.
George, I had an experience just before I met Michael with, I don't know if you knew who Dr. Ray Brown is.
No.
He was the one who found the Atlantean crystal in a pyramid off the coast of Bimini.
Okay.
And he did Discovery and In Search of did things on him. And he was a personal friend of Michael's and mine.
What do you mean he was? What happened to him?
Well, he's not with us anymore. He died. He had an early, checked out rather early, but he was actually involved in black ops going down to South America, and he was a deep sea diver. He had dived with Jacques Cousteau, and he was knighted by the British government for his Bach flower remedies. And when he found this Atlantean crystal on a dive, they really wanted it bad. The dark side really wanted it bad, this crystal. They even broke into his place and stole it a couple of times, but it always reappeared back.
Well, I can see that happening.
The crystal was magical. I saw it myself. And just before I met Michael, I came to Phoenix, Arizona from Detroit, and I was at the Hilton Hotel there, and I walked into the International Yoga and Psychic Convention, of all places to walk into. I had
unexpected?
No idea what was going on.
Okay.
I just went there for breakfast on Saturday morning when I was in town.
All right.
And there I hear Dr. Ray Brown talking about finding this crystal. I was so impressed by his lecture, I stayed afterwards, and a medium came in, and she held the crystal in her hands, an incredible medium from London who was in town for the convention, holds the crystal in her hands, and she says, "Gather around me, for the Most Highs are about to put on a display for you so that you'll know what I'm about to say is the truth." And I rushed right up to her, and I was standing right next to her at her right side, and my friend Marvin was standing right behind me, and all these people were there. It was about 150 of us, I'd say. And so with that, the crystal in her hands are wide open. The room is well lit. The crystal starts turning every color of the rainbow. And it was just gorgeous, like neon pulsing jello. It was changing shape and color and pulsing. And like neon jello is the only way I can describe it, getting larger and smaller. It was just unbelievable. And then it went back to normal, and we all took our seats, and she said, "The Most High's put on a display for you today so that you'll know what I'm about to say is the truth." And she said, "The army of light is being formed. This is truly the crystal from the temple of the Great White Brotherhood. And when you are bright enough and light enough, that will be our signal upstairs to come and remove you from this planet."
So we're getting close.
And they said that these things would pass during our lifetime. And, as it says in Revelation of the Bible, when the Jews returned home to Israel, that was 1948,
Mm-hmm.
and the desert begins to bloom as though or an oasis. the children who are born then will usher in the beginning of the end, and that all the things in Revelations would happen before they passed.
You're talking Armageddon, Aurora.
Well, we're talking about changes. We're talking about some major changes, a shift in frequency, the golden age coming in. We don't need to live in eternal war and strife and starvation and illness. It's not necessary.
And also with the new timeline being created, it is my perception, if we go back to the Council of Nicaea, where they altered things just like the Warren Commission on the Kennedy assassination, just like the 9/11 Commission, same handpicked group of people, manipulated the historical conception, altered a lot of things. The truth is still there, but it's been altered and suppressed and manipulated. So we have to use our discernment to now see it in the context of new frequencies, a new timeline, a new understanding given to us, and higher forces preparing to intervene to help us go through this, and a little R&R, giving us a chance to get a new perspective that the power elite have withheld from us. There's incredible times ahead of us if we keep ourselves focused and centered.
Michael, I want to talk with you next hour about the Planet X and Armageddon, but would you tell everybody where they can pick up, because it's a great read, Prepare for the Landings. You and Aurora have done a superb job with this. And
yes, well, Prepare for the Landings, the great book, which we will also, for those who order it, we'll send an autographed copy to everybody. But at prepareforthelandings.com, you can order the book. You even download it as an e-book as well, which is for some people like that, and then the old-fashioned way of a paperback version. But we'll autograph it, and I kind of refer to it as your boarding pass, because it does.
Well, if they order a book, though, at Prepare for the Landings, then they'll get an autographed copy.
Exactly, at our board.
And it's nice to have a book in your hand and keep it on your shelf. And
right.
It's a keeper, and I know it's a book that people are going to want to share with their friends and family, because it ties together science, religion, and philosophy with our personal experiences.
And why they're going to intervene and all the confirmations leading up to that.
Absolutely. And you've got some Brad Steiger is mentioned, and he's a good man.
Yeah, we knew Brad and Francie very well. We were living in Scottsdale, just not very far away from them for many years.
He is a superb writer and author as well. Are you too scared of the future, or are you excited about it?
We're incredibly optimistic.
Anybody who understands about how they're going to have intervention, and it's not to solve our problems. This is to help us, help ourselves. If we will rise to the occasion and fulfill our responsibility as what I call the ground crew, the cleanup crew, the volunteers that are here, our backup team who's intervened in our lives and the lives of millions of volunteers, star people, volunteers out there, we're about to experience a miraculous opportunity that we've only had in past times briefly in an emergency scenario. This is a whole new thing of having a series of waves that's going to allow every soul on the planet, if they'll just rise to the occasion, think some personal responsibility, this is an opportunity to shift levels very, very fast. Doesn't come very often, because this is the end of many cycles, all aligning, happens to align with the Mayan calendar and a lot of other coincidences, quote unquote, but there's a lot of shifting occurring, genetic DNA, RNA being reactivated, and it's an exciting time to be here. I'm looking forward with great passion and gusto. Waited all my entire life. I knew this was coming.
There will be some victims, though, Michael, I would take along the way, right?
Well, nobody's really a victim, but some people have chosen. I think we make choices all along. Yes, the cabal's tried to victimize us, but we can either buy into that or choose, as we always have right to do, choose a different way. There's 1,000 paths of the Godhead. We can choose to unite with beings to respect our sovereignty, to respect the sacred principles, or we can play the role as a victim. It's up to us.
Super director and writer George Lucas thinks 2012 may be it for all of us. What do you think?
Oh, I think it's just like the tarot card. It's the death card. It's not a death. It's the end of the old, the beginning of a new. I don't believe, like the 2012 movie, that they're going to be disastrous, going to be destroyed. I see it as a transition and a much calmer in this new timeline than the old timeline.
Okay, what about the false flag? Is that possible? Were they fake an invasion?
Yeah, I think they're going to attempt it, but I've been told that even during the Iraq War, they actually projected holographic images of Muhammad in the sky. Then the Federation Lights stepped in and made it clear to the cabal, no, you're not going to be allowed to do this. Oh, they're going to try. They're going to try to fool the people, and I think we have to be discerning about a lot of corporate-controlled media and what they say, but I think if people wake up and really demand accountability and live their life with accountability, that gives the Federation Light mandated authority to step in and neutralize these false flags with their black op technologies, and what Gary McKinnon did, documented that there is a anti-gravity fleet, but they're out now. They are like Model Ts compared to the Jaguar Maseratis flying around up there.
Well, there's talk that there is a Planet X out there. Let's get your take on that, Michael, when we come right back. We're with Michael Edley-John. We're talking about his work, Prepare for the Landings. We're going to take your phone calls. We're going to talk about Planet X when we come back on Coast to Coast AM. Michael, what have you been told about this Planet X? What's out there?
Well, in the communications with my contacts in the ASHTAR Command, the Federation of Light, they have confirmed that there is, in fact, we are actually a binary system, that our second star never ignited. It actually became a dwarf star, so it's, in a sense, a dense planetary body, comes on an elliptical orbit, and about every 3,600 years, and basically, in fact, I received a communication many, many months ago, this last year, that I added to the book from Lord ASHTAR and Commander Soltych. Soltych is quite famous, as in the 1950s he was in contact with a famous contactee named Richard Miller, and has been channeling through many of us contactees and channels, and connect with many of the other beings like ASHTAR and Monka. Anyway, he, as an astrophysicist, has specifically said that, yes, Nibiru is coming in Wormwood, but there's some question of exactly how severe, how intense it's going to be, whether, in fact, evacuation will be necessary. They intimated it's very possible, but because the new timeline is playing out and we are going into a higher dimension, and if you also take the work of some people who feel that this time it's not going to be as severe, I don't really know, but it seems very likely we could have some upheavals and a natural byproduct of its close approach. There's some evidence also in the 1970s that some astronomers were very aware of it, but because of a code of silence or being ordered not to talk about it, they basically refused to talk about it from then on. But there has been evidence through the years. In fact, one of the reasons that there's evidence that the power elite are building huge underground bunkers, and even Jesse Ventura on his show, Conspiracy Theory, interviewed certain people that there is, in fact, a huge, for many years, the power elite have known that Nibiru was coming in, and their attitude was, well, we'll build these underground bunkers, and everyone else can be thrown to the curb. Well, I think that our consciousness determines whether we survive. You can build all the bunkers you want, put guards around you, but you're not going to survive if your consciousness is not attuned to this new vibration.
Well, that's a good point. And like you say, they have known something's coming, and they don't want to tell us.
Right.
Panic? You think?
Well, yeah, maybe in one hand, I think that they would be forced to have to answer to accountability charges of human genocide programs like the false vaccine programs and the chemtrail stuff going in the skies. They're guilty of a lot of blood on their hands, and this is just one more thing of not telling people, keeping it to themselves, thinking they're going to survive while the rest of us can, basically are on our own. But what they don't realize is, again, that the higher forces that are monitoring our frequencies, they tune into our heart. They tune into who we are, and they can tell who those of us who are respectful to the sacred principles, who are part here on a mission also, and who's going to graduate off the wheel of karma. And it's pretty clear that our consciousness is the real deciding factor, not building underground bunkers and keeping a nasty state of consciousness of wanting to still control and manipulate us. That's going to make them all be, I'm told, if they don't align with the light, they are literally going to be recycled to the Godhead, to be as if they ever existed. So they can try to escape, but they're not going to be able to and have to face the consequences.
Tell me about this intervention. How will it occur?
Well, as I have been told, and it's like when that being walked to me at Squaw Peak Park in Phoenix, Arizona back in 1981, it's just one of the many confirmations. I was specifically told that unlike the old emergency evacuation, where it was a one-time deal during the final days of Atlantis, coming down a few ships, taking up a few 100,000, a few million people out of Atlantis, Lemuria, and Hyboria, that this time they wanted a book published, as I've been able to do, and also through many contactees and channels, getting people prepared for what was inevitably going to happen. That this time, by doing a series of waves, from a point of human psychology also, when people can observe it and see other people who've gone taken up and come back, then people could kind of relate to it. People coming back, being transformed. Now, of course, intermixed with this, depending how long the cabal is still in power, I know they will attempt to make it into a false flag and say we're being invaded. That's why we have to be discerning. But as the energy shifts on the planet, and more people wake up on a mass level, which is what I see happening, and people regain their cognitive, deductive reasoning and discernment, and they tune into this frequency, instead of trying to come through ego and resisting it, as the cabal is doing, surrendering to this new energy, surrendering to it, becoming attuned to it, some really wonderful things are going to happen. And I think one of the things that some people are feeling right now is a lot of old, repressed emotional patterns from all these lives and ages coming up as a little pain right now. But as we go through it and we release that and get in touch with who we are, beautiful times are ahead for us. So we're being prepared vibrationally. And as I mentioned in the book, there is actually a scale of frequency from around 0 to 500. It's a harmonic scale. As long as you're vibrating around 200, you'll be able to be lifted up without any problem. And there's new technology the aliens have unveiled recently that will allow us to more easily connect with that energy. As long as we take personal responsibility for ourselves, they will enhance it and help us make this shift.
Okay, very good. Let's go to the calls. We'll pick it up by going to Culver City, California to start. First-time caller. Hey, Jeff, go ahead.
Yes, how you doing, George?
Good, Jeffrey. Good.
Yes, I definitely want to comment on tonight's program. It's a great program, and there's something definitely to this alien abduction stuff because something's been going on with all these movies. You know, they have, like, all of these movies coming out with spaceships hovering over.
They're everywhere.
Major cities, yeah. And I just want to know, ask your